Welcome to the Rust Belt Revolution podcast, where we discuss everything from politics to pop culture.
I'm Nick.
And I'm John. We're two random guys from the Midwest. These are our thoughts and opinions, and nothing we say is meant to be taken as advice. Hope you enjoy the show.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's edition of the Rust Belt Revolution podcast. Thanks for joining us.
How's it going, Nick?
Not bad, John. How are things this week?
Little girl's sick, but other than that, everything's going pretty good.
Fantastic.
Enjoyed Thanksgiving. First time 5 years I've actually enjoyed it, so that's a plus.
That's great. Yeah, Thanksgiving was kind of quick and dirty this year. I feel like for us, I kind of said screw it because I didn't feel like cooking the turkey and doing all the other stuff. So I'm like, hey, Dad, why don't you host Thanksgiving? Because I've done every holiday for like years now.
Yeah.
Somehow I still ended up cooking like 6 things.
That's how it goes.
Yeah. So spent my whole day in front of the stove, but it was good. We all ate like gluttons, and I haven't felt right since.
Pretty much. Saw that tryptophan.
Yeah. Well, let's see. This week we are talking about, super positive, super uplifting subject that's on everybody's minds all the time. That is abortion.
And clearly everyone has the same opinion on it. So
everybody agrees about abortion. I mean, if there's anything we can all reach consensus about, it is definitely abortions.
Yes.
Well, I think maybe to start off by talking about abortion, maybe we should just kind of discuss in general, maybe as a disclaimer, we're both men.
Yep.
So that I'm not saying it discredits our opinion, but in my opinion, it's a sort of a female led discussion.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I agree with that. I mean, like you said, we're allowed to have our opinions, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really have anything to do with us.
Trues.
But I do think it's worth discussing. I know my opinions.
Yeah.
I mean, my opinions on it have changed a lot in the last, 7-8 years.
Yeah, I can't say my opinions have really changed that much. I've always had the same opinion on this particular subject since probably like my late high school years. I think my perspective prior to that was super uneducated. But I think what makes the two of us interesting, John, is we both come from similar backgrounds with having been brought up in, mostly Protestant Christian homes.
Yeah.
And so it's you grow up with that fear, that biblical fear being beaten into you, kind of. I mean, and then you kind of you get to a point in life where you really got to take a step back and think to yourself, maybe there's more to this.
Oh yeah. Well, like I said in the intro episode, I was conservative Christian, raised and brainwashed for a lot of years. And I was always liberal as far as, rape and incest. I believed it was up to the woman. But other than that, I was it's a baby, you should let it be born. And where I'm still at the opinion it's a baby, I think it's completely up to the woman at this point.
So why don't we start off by just discussing this little tidbit? Do you believe that life starts at conception?
Personally, I do. A lot of it probably has to do with how I was raised, but I believe that once the baby is conceived, I think it's got a soul. I think it's fully formed, well, not fully formed, but a living, being, and it as it grows in the womb, I think it, develops into a fully formed person. Uh, as someone who is not medically trained at all, I couldn't tell you when, it fully becomes a life or whatever by the classical definition, like human life. I couldn't even begin to qualify myself as someone who could put a timestamp on that. Um, I do believe it's a little ridiculous to think it's not a person until it comes out of the woman's body. To me, that's
Right.
I mean, I don't know when that magical moment is where it stops being a fetus and becomes a baby. I don't. So to me, that's why I leave it up to the women to decide for themselves. Obviously, it's not an easy decision, so I'm not disregarding that at all. Um, I don't know. I just, like I said, with my Christian background, and then as I've, you know, become more of a Buddhist, Taoist, whatever I am at this point, I I think it's just confirmed my belief in the soul, and I don't know. That's kind of where I stand on it.
So I feel like for me, I grew up sort of with this notion of life life begins at conception, sort of being instilled into me. But the older the older I got and the more complicated my belief systems became, I feel like for me it's not quite the same anymore. I don't for one, the whole idea of a soul, like every human has a soul, like it's not I don't feel like it's rooted in like science. It's not something that can be proven. It's a faith-based assumption that everything has a soul. So right there, we're already making assumptions, and the point at which a child, a fetus, an embryo, like whatever you want to call it, the point at which it gains life or becomes defined as a human life worth saving, I guess, like it goes from being sort of like this amorphous sort of like parasitic being to being like a human child. Like the point at which that happens, I think, is the point at which that thing can sustain itself outside the womb without medical intervention. Now, you could make the argument that even a full three, a child that's ready to be born, it went the full, what is it, 40 weeks, 42 weeks,
40 weeks.
40 weeks, yeah. So, full third trimester, ready to be born. Even that child will need medical interventions outside the womb after birth. My own child was in the NICU for weeks, but he was premature.
Yeah.
So, it sort of becomes like this. I personally believe that the life should be protected, at which point it can be saved.
Yeah.
Outside the womb. I don't think anybody would disagree with that.
No, I think that's completely reasonable.
I think prior to that life, prior to that child having its own ability to sort of like fight, I don't know that you can actually qualify it as as a life. You know what I mean? Like I'm not sure. Sure. I'm still kind of out. I'm still kind of on on the fence because like there are just some questions that we haven't answered yet. Like consciousness, the point at which something gains consciousness, the point at which it becomes self-aware, has memories, has like, it's, I don't know, it's all very very complicated. But I personally believe that there's this very interesting thing that happens only in a woman's body where they're able to sustain a life for 40 weeks and then give birth to it. It's like it's magical, but at the same time it's horrifying for some people depending on the situation.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. I'm kind of off on a tangent, but I think that at the end of the day, it's a woman's decision, you
Yep.
know, and it there are just so many factors involved. Having been through it 3 times, not pregnancy, but having seen my my wife go through pregnancy 3 times and us having 3 children, it's there were times where it was just a struggle for her.
Yeah.
It's not an easy thing.
Well, I mean, that's when my ex-wife was pregnant. It was amazing to watch, but there was definitely some issues that she faced that I would never even be able to imagine, especially the actual giving birth part. It's the most terrifying thing I've ever witnessed in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. It all 3 of our boys were born cesarean. So had that been something that she faced even 100 years ago,
Yeah.
the chances that those boys would have been born and that she would have lived are very it's very kind of up in the air, you
Yeah.
know. So it's science, man. Science science grows and we learn more, and what was previously unknown becomes known and perfected, sort of improved.
Yeah.
It's there's this like God of the gaps theory, like God is an ever receding pocket of human ignorance,
Yeah.
and I think that's kind of how I look at it from an abortion standpoint too. It's like it's less about like life and things like that and more about like what our perceptions are of like God. And we allow too much to convolute the subject.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But
Well, and
that's how I look at a lot of things.
I mean, I still declare myself as pro-life, but in the sense that, I think it's a baby. I would like every pregnancy to come to term. It's not up to me. I don't get to make that decision. And I think it's up to every woman to make that decision for themselves. I
Mm.
also don't think it's any government's job ever to tell anyone what they can do with their own body. And like, I've made the argument with my parents because, they're conservative Christians, die hard, won't even hear anything that's pro-choice. And at this point, I've made the argument so many times it's ridiculous. If you want to lower abortion rates, you have free healthcare, free education, and paid parental leave. And
Right.
those 3 things lower abortion rates more than anything else. And they just don't want to hear it because, oh, you're still allowing babies to be killed. It's like,
Yeah. That's the other side of the discussion, which is like how abortion is viewed at the national level and the political level, because we have turned abortion into something where like everybody gets to have an opinion, and it's become put up on this pedestal. Like, it's an extremely personal, extremely difficult decision that any woman has to go through when she has to choose to have an abortion. And for us to politicize it like this and to make it into something that is just like it's horrifying that people have to like be under this level of mental duress when they need to have a medical procedure, because it shouldn't be that way.
right.
Like you said, if you're really concerned about children and you're really concerned about saving lives, then help educate people about safe sex and about you know all the other things that you could be focusing on other than just honing in on abortion
Yeah.
specifically. Like it doesn't make any sense. Healthcare, free healthcare. Yeah,
Yeah.
like you said, and then like childcare, and it's the list goes on and on. It's we have there are so many other easy targets to help save lives. Like you don't need to focus in on the one that is arguably the sort of it's just not relevant.
Right. Well, that's my whole argument has always been, if you want less abortions, you have to have less pregnancies. And those three things prove that that works,
Mm.
And I mean, a lot of people don't have kids because they can't afford it. They can't afford to miss the time from work. They can't afford food. Like,
That's actually sort of, I think, a revolution of like our generation, sort of. Like it's always been known, like, if you don't want kids, then you need to be safe. But like more and more I see these days, people, millennials and zennials, they're opting into vasectomies, and they're opting into getting their tubes tied at a younger age, whether it's for medical reasons or whether it's just a personal choice.
yeah,
So that's been very encouraging. A lot of people are being proactive about their reproductive capabilities.
yeah, oh
So
yeah,
like it's definitely it's interesting to see. I know of a few people that have been in my life that have elected to get those things done, and I know people that have medically been forced to get those things done.
yeah,
And both of what's interesting is neither of them desired to have children.
right,
Even the girl I know that medically needed to get it done, she had no real desire to have kids before they told her that she should get her tubes tied, and that pregnancy would be extremely dangerous for her. So it's encouraging, but then again, um, we do live in the U.S. where education about those things is more prevalent. But you go into like some other countries, you know, in places in the world where there's less education, there's more population, there's less. It's less of a sterile environment. You know, botched abortion rates are extreme, and women die, and that's terrible
yeah.
that happens. So it's just I don't see how you can't be pro life but still be pro life.
Yeah.
Just doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I mean,
Which life
most,
is more important?
right. Well,
you know,
most conservatives are pro-life until birth, and then they don't give a shit anymore. It's,
right?
well, the child's born, it's your responsibility now. Well, they didn't want that responsibility. They knew they couldn't handle that responsibility.
You
You've
force them.
Right.
Yeah,
It's like now it's the community's responsibility to take care of this child that nobody wanted in the first place. That's fucked up. Like,
yeah, it's extremely fucked up. Yeah,
and I mean, it's not like the foster care or adoption systems in this country are fantastic. Like,
it's just like philosophically, what does that mean? Like what is the implication of that? If you force pregnancies like that to that level, the implication is that women are somehow now just once they become pregnant, they sacrifice their rights.
right.
You know what I mean? Like that's turning a woman for 9 months from having the same rights as any other human to basically she becomes a machine.
Yeah.
You
She's a
know,
breeder.
she's a breeder. Like it's that's extremely fucked up logic.
Yeah.
It's creepy.
It's disgusting on every level.
It
And
is.
it doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, there has to be a level of autonomy for every single
Absolutely.
individual. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't just say, hey, this is how it is for everyone, no matter what. That doesn't work ever. It's never worked.
Shout out to Michigan, coming to you live from Michigan, where we have some of the best reproductive rights secured in the country at this point.
Yep.
Which is something I never thought I'd say in my life.
It's definitely a good time to be living in this state.
It is. It's a good time to be living in Michigan. We still have our issues for sure.
Plenty of them.
Plenty of issues, but every once in a while we get some things right. But yes, autonomy, reproductive rights, these are things that you cannot say that you're, I don't know, you can't say you're concerned for human life if you don't also respect the rights of the mother.
Right.
So it's you be pro-life, pro-baby life, but you're pro-baby life with caveats, and you're definitely not pro, mother's rights or pro-mother life.
Well, and then
that's my very in uneloquent way of talking about abortion at 9 a.m. on a Sunday.
Well, that's I heard a pastor once say that every time you talk someone out of getting an abortion, you're saving that child's soul or whatever. And
I've heard that sermon before too.
Just from a Christian perspective, like, this is how I was raised. I understand that life pretty well. That makes absolutely zero sense. You're not saving, like, if you believe that child has a soul at conception and you let it go to term, you're potentially condemning it to an eternity in hell, according to the Christians, because if it dies in the womb, straight shot up to heaven. So as far as Christians go, I don't even understand.
I think once it's born, though, it's still an innocent, right?
Well, yeah, but
so
if it reaches the age of accountability, it's that child's choice if it wants to.
That's another. It's another good subject in the whole Christian sphere. Like, the age of accountability, is that not like a second biblical life? Like, if you're not out there trying to save people for Jesus and save souls, are you actually pro-life?
Right.
Because that person's going to hell anyway if you don't save their soul. So, I mean, if you ain't out there door knocking for Jesus, I don't know that you're actually pro-life, folks.
Right. I mean, it's the level of hypocrisy that comes with the pro-life movement that just, it drives me insane. And it's like, use a little logic and you could get most of your way. Like,
yeah.
I mean, that's it. Just every time I discuss, anytime abortion comes up with any of my family or Christian friends or whatever, it's always, well, you gotta have the child be born because that's child's right, or it's the child's rights. And I'm like, what about the mom?
Yeah.
Like I said, I believe it's a baby, but at the same time, it's not up to me. It's up to the mom, because if she doesn't want it, that child is going to end up being fucked over, and it would be better had they not been born. Probably not going to say always, because I know,
I think that what a lot of Christian institutions focus on these days is they try to call themselves like positive pregnancy centers or like whatever. Like, they try to encourage the mom to sort of become attached to the life, or just the idea of the pregnancy and like what a magical thing it is. And like, they try to, reinforce that there are resources out there for them to like have a successful pregnancy. And and to try to raise the child after the birth, even if they're not considering adoption, they'll talk to them about how, like, diapers are available, and there's classes to help new young mothers and things like that. And these are all great things. I'm
Yeah.
not saying that any of those things should stop, but the motivation behind those things can't just be like, you know, let's just save this one child or whatever. Like, it seems like it's coming from a perspective of like where like people's hearts are in the right place, but I don't know that it actually is. Like at what point that like they want the baby to be born, they want the mother to choose to keep the baby. But what if the mother is like suffering from addiction, or like is in mental health crisis, or anything like this? Like, she's showing up to the classes, great. Maybe she's not showing up to the classes, she's just coming to get diapers and formula. That's also great. Like, I know of a lot of women who just use those centers as places to get emergency formula, or diapers when their baby is running low or something like that. They're still making that effort. That's fantastic. I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, you have to be a one-stop shop, and you have to see that through that mission.
Yeah.
You can't just stop at baby.
Right.
And I think that's take where a lot of the gaps are.
Oh yeah.
We rely on state human health services to sort of step in and kind of take control at a certain point. They end up removing a lot of children from homes at young ages, because these mothers, that never wanted a baby to begin with, chose to have a baby because they were sort of coaxed into it.
Yeah.
But they never should have had the kid to begin with, because it wasn't something they were ready for. They probably thought about having an abortion, but then went to one of these places where they were talked into keeping it, and then somewhere down the line, they get their kid taken away by the state because they couldn't handle what they knew they couldn't handle,
Right.
that they were talked into doing. It's
Oh yeah.
That's happened,
Oh yeah.
right? Like it's just, that's so fucked up. That's such a large amount of trauma that just never should happen.
Right. Well, and then I mean, my ex-wife and I, we used one of those pregnancy uh, centers that the church helps run.
Yeah.
And
Right.
I mean, it was great. We got free clothes, we got free diapers. They helped us, through the whole pregnancy, a year or two after, I don't remember for how long. But the thing that I had a problem with it, even at the time when I was conservative and Christian and going to church every Sunday and, helping out with the youth group and all that shit, like, the problem I had with it was they wouldn't let you use any of their resources unless you did their little take-home Bible study packet that they gave you every week when you came in to get your stuff.
Yeah. There's other ones that my mom used to go to, like when I was young, where they would make you sit there and pray with them before you left. I remember that, and it's just like, wow. Like,
well, I mean, I don't. Here's the thing: I don't care if someone wants to pray for me. Yeah, do it up. I use all the prayers I get at this point, but to force people, like, to have to put the time and investment into studying your religion just so that they can afford to keep the baby that you may have talked them into keeping anyway is ridiculous. Like, if they don't want to take part in that, they shouldn't have to.
right. Yeah, it's weird. I think some people are pro-life. There's a lot of people in this country that are pro-life, and they don't really understand, or they haven't thought about it as much.
Yeah.
They haven't been presented with all the arguments. They haven't been shown all the evidence. Like, they haven't there's a lot of people in this country that are still pro-life that are still on this whole like very old, very like out of the mainstream notion of what life is like in this
Yeah.
country, you know?
Right.
These are like your boomer voters, like a lot of boomer voters, and like even like elder Gen Xers, you know, who were raised that way, like still have these very antiquated notions of what life is like in this country, and they vote a certain way just because that's the way that they're, you know, they were brought up, the way that this person voted that meant something to them. Like it just, for you to be a single issue voter,
Yeah.
when there are so many other things on the line,
Right.
like
Well, that was my, like, is another pet peeve of mine is my sister only votes according to where people stand on abortion. It's the only thing she votes on. And I'm like, there are so many other issues that you could focus on. Why is this the one?
issues that arguably impact lives
Way more.
more. Yeah, it just it'll never make sense to me.
Nope, not at all.
Well, that's all I think I have to say on abortion, John.
Yeah, I'll be honest. We didn't talk about it for as long as I thought we were going to.
I think it's because we agree more than we ever used to.
That's true.
I think you know, if we would have had this conversation 10 years ago,
No, it would have been a lot different.
it would have been a lot different. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
And we probably did have this conversation 10 years ago, which is funny.
Oh, I'm sure we did.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think.
But hey, we are where we are.
Oh yeah, and you know, self-education and personal growth goes a long
Nice.
way in changing your perspective on shit.
I mean, you have kids, you go through life, you go through jobs, you meet people, like you know, like it's just part of the growing experience. Like I remember going to so many of those clinics. I'm not going to call them clinics. They were like resource centers,
Yeah.
whatever. Almost all of them that I went to when I was young was run by a church, usually a Catholic church.
Yeah.
I feel like the Catholic Church has a lot of those kinds of pregnancy centers. But there were some of them that were run by, you know, more evangelical, you know, Christian churches too. But it just, I never felt good, as weird as that sounds, like as a kid going along with my mom to those places. So I give like formula diapers and onesies and other stuff from like, you know, for my brothers and sisters. Like it never felt good going to those places. It always felt weird.
Yeah. That's, like I said, I commend them for helping out as much as they do.
For sure.
There are caveats to that though, and
Yeah.
you know, hoops you have to jump through that I don't think, if they were truly pro-life, they wouldn't require that.
Yeah. Oh jeez.
But so I think that's all for this one. And we haven't figured out what we're talking about next week, but we'll be here talking about something, you know, to bring us all together and agree.
We're going to talk about what we're going to talk about next week right now, and then we're going to talk about that, and then we're going to edit it back into the segment.
Right, exactly.
Yep. And it'll be like it never happened.
All right. Well, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Adios. Thank you for listening to the Rust Belt Revolution podcast. Follow us on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. If you have any questions for John and I, please leave a comment. If you like the podcast, please share and leave a review.